Can I just start with an apology, which is this is going to be long and rambling. I'm going to cover far too much. You're never going to be able to get to grips with the volume of things that I'm going to cover here. And at some point, I've asked if you'll just shout, "Get off in 5 minutes," so that I know where I am. The reason that I'm doing this is because we've done such a phenomenal amount of work on this subject that it's just impossible to say this is the most important bit. The Commonweal project began about 1.5 years ago when the Foundation was looking and saying, what contribution do we make to this campaign? What do we do? Because the Reid Foundation itself is staying politically neutral. It's a space for different people who are interested in socially progressive politics to come together and to discuss and to debate. I personally am a strong independence supporter, but we didn't know how to deal with this to try and find a way to keep everyone together. So what we said we would do is, let's just do a project which imagines what would Scotland look like if you could make it what you wanted it to be, without stating what powers necessarily you needed. And just draw that vision and then let people look at that and they can draw their own conclusions about what powers that you need. Now, we envisaged this as starting with 6 reports, and we announced it. And when we announced it, by this point, we talked to a number of poets and novelists and others and said, what would you call a Scottish version of the Nordic kind of a society? And they came back and they said Commonweal. So we launched it as the Commonweal Project. And as soon as we did, we were just simply knocked down with people coming to us and saying, we want to do some work. Would you like a policy paper on this? It's now well over 50 policy papers, major reports covering absolutely every subject that you could imagine right across the gamut. We have written this up as a short book because who can read 50 policy papers? You can get it on the website, allofusfirst.org, and it gives a summary of all of this stuff. In this work, there is a kind of underlying philosophy, which is really what I want to get to here, which is we've been working in a system which is primarily focused on conflict, a conflict system of social and economic development in the UK. If you take 2 people and you put them in a room, whoever comes out alive must be the best. If we do that over and over again and we keep repeatedly backing the winner, we will eventually arrive at some sort of a utopia. That's the fundamental concept of UK economic development, but it's also social development. So it applies to planning and housing and control of housing stock. It applies to retail, the controlling of the space where money is spent. It applies to all the various cartel areas and energy and banking where we've assumed that allowing greater and greater concentration must be good for all because we allowed the best to win. This is, of course, daft, and it's a complete misreading of Darwinian evolution in the first place. I don't know if any of you saw the fabulous Horizon documentary about cats and what they do when you're not with them. I've got a cat and I love cats, and it was fascinating. And one of the things that was very interesting was the question of cats and conflict. Because people assume that, you know, that arching of backs and hissing and spitting, baring of claws, that's cats fighting. That is absolute rubbish. What that is cats avoiding a fight. Cats are such dangerous predators that if 2 cats fight, it is likely that both will die, including the victor. The cats which evolved were the cats which knew how to avoid a fight. That is the evolutionary success. It is not who can be bigger and who can beat the other. Evolutionary success is who can be the most effective and who can create the best outcome. If we take that model, that way of thinking, and we apply it to economic development, we escape the UK's model of monopoly bully capitalism, because that's what happened. If you keep backing whoever it is that can win in any aggressive head-to-head battle, and you do that indefinitely, all you do is you create a nation of bullies and psychopaths. That is the profile which enables these sorts of victories to take place, and we can't allow that. Look at the other model, a model of mutual social and economic development. Jens Stoltenberg, Norwegian Prime Minister, referred to it in terms of to build more, we must share more. Now, this is right. And when I try to explain this to people who are not economic development professionals, I try to explain it by saying, imagine that you were running a nursery school. If you were running a nursery school and you wanted something to be built, what strategy would you follow? Would you allow the largest child to shove all the other children out of the way and hoard the Lego? No. Hoarding Lego, grabbing Lego, hoarding Lego and shoving other children becomes the purpose of the game. That is more or less a description of UK equity capitalism. If you want to get anything built, spread the Lego more evenly across the children. Some of them will stick it up their nose, some of them will hoard it, some of them will lose it. But across the piece, on aggregate, many of them will build, and what you will get is more building. To share more, to build more, we must share more. It's a simple understanding of the idea that we have to distribute resource, including wealth and human talent, more evenly across the economy if we're going to get growth. Okay, that's the underlying philosophical idea that we're trying to argue, that you'll look for solutions that create an environment in which the most possible players can win, not look at the possible players and identify which one you would like to win, or allowing the one which is able to win to win. That's the underlying idea. To expand this, we have a whole range of policy papers. They're all on the website. I should explain. The Commonweal website is a plain English website which anybody can understand, allofusfirst.org. The Reid Foundation is a little more academic at reidfoundation.org. That's where you'll find all the policy papers. The ones that would be particularly relevant to this is the Industrial Democracy paper, Working Together. We're about to publish the Economic Development Strategy, which hasn't got a name yet, but it's just at the final approval stage. We've got a major investment paper, which is very important. There's a procurement paper. There's papers coming in food and various other areas, which are also relevant and important to this. So what I'll try and do is just keep rattling through some of the ideas, because what I want to emphasise here is that we've kind of analysed ourselves to death. We've really had an awful lot of, and I'm not going to go to Ben, but we've had an awful lot of PowerPoint presentations about globalisation. And we've been in this paradigm shift since I can remember. I'd like to see this paradigm actually shift rather than be told it's shifting. So let's shift the paradigm, not by analysing it, not by PowerPoint presentations, but a course of action. Here is the course. Well, first of all, let me describe specifically what we need to have as an outcome. The problem that we've got in the UK at the moment is all to do with the labour market structure. Everything else stems from that. If you look at the Scottish labour market today, of people who earn between £25,000 and £35,000, which most people take to be a kind of standard salary, that's only achieved by 1 in 5 of people working in Scotland today. 3 in 5 earn less than £25,000, half of working Scots earn less than £21,000, and if you earn £14,000 a year, you're still better off than 30% of your fellow employees. We're a chronically low-wage economy. The implications for this are enormous, and everything else stems from it. If you take the UK tax model or the Scottish tax model, you keep it exactly the same. So this is the same computer model. The only thing that you do to it is you change the income structure. And you change that income structure to the income structure of a Nordic economy. Low levels of extraordinary pay at the top, no chronically poor pay at the bottom, and a much more even spread with a higher volume of people in employment. If you do that and nothing else, and you run the tax model again, it generates £4 billion in additional tax revenue. So that's the deficit solved, and that's the investment in public services solved. We don't have a problem with tax. We don't have a problem with public services. We have a problem with low wages. The UK is the second lowest wage economy in the developed world, in the advanced economies. And this is important because despite all the rhetoric of neoliberal capitalism, GDP does not create wealth among citizens. It's got nothing to do with creating wealth among citizens. There's only one thing that creates wealth among citizens, and that's wages. Wages are the distribution mechanism that create wealth in society. If you do not distribute through wages, you will never catch it up through a kind of Gordon Brown style of cash transfer on the back of taxes from an illusory financial services sector. That's what we've been going through for the last 15 or 20 years prior to the crash, and now we're just in straightforward retrenchment. That won't work. We have to transform the economy. It is amazing to me that I have to explain to people in fairly senior levels of policy what productivity actually means, because in the UK we no longer talk about productivity, we no longer talk about balance of trade, we don't really talk about exports, we only talk about footfall in the high street and house prices. That's our indicators of economic health, and that's why the UK economy is 16 percentage points behind the average productivity of an advanced economy. It's why our track record on innovation is woeful. It's why our balance of trade, if you take out the oil, our balance of trade is embarrassing and really worrying, and one of the reasons why I can understand that the UK doesn't want to lose Scotland is they're going to have to face up to the weakness of their exporting economy once they lose the oil. People are going to start to notice these things. We need to get back to this. And I come from the left. And the fact that it's the left that's saying, right, enough now, let's start measuring ourselves against productivity, innovation, trade, export, and balance of trade is, I think, telling to where we've got to. We need to remove things round. The way that we need to remove things round is identify what it is that creates wealth. If you have wealth-extracting companies, they've been calling themselves wealth creators, they're not. Wealth-extracting companies are industry sectors which take a largely static market and capture more of it for themselves. The classic example being housing, where large interests have controlled housing stock, controlled housing prices, and have used that to transfer money to them. Retail's another good one. If you build a shed in a field outside a town and you can close down its high street, you don't create more wealth, you just take more wealth out of that economy. You can do this if the banking sector's done the same thing, and lots of other sectors in our economy. These do not create wealth, they distribute wealth, and they hoard wealth. That's what these industries do. They have an important social function, but for making people wealthy, they don't work. What makes people wealthy? Creating value. If you have work which has inherent value and requires skill, you pay people. If it is a routine service sector, you don't pay. It's as simple as that. Everyone keeps talking about the need to rebalance the economy. Yeah, Let's stop talking about it. Let's rebalance the economy. We need much more manufacturing. We need much more high skill. We have to get away from the corporate capture of the low skill end of the market. I was a bit disappointed to hear that localism means a multinational corporation rebranding itself at the France level. That's not localism. That's just a corporate scam. There's not a real meaning of any of this change. And so, I haven't been told it's 5 minutes yet, but it must nearly be. Let me run through some of the things that we need to do, because there are things that we need to do. And to say that it's all okay is not a rational response to where we are just now. The first thing we need to do is get back to having an investment culture in this country. In the UK at the moment, if you take all private investment, all public investment, and all personal investment, the whole lot, you add it all together and you subtract depreciation, you get a negative number. We are negatively investing in the UK. At the moment, we aren't even putting in enough money to stand still. Austerity is not about public finances. Austerity is an anti-investment model. Investment, the expenditure of time, effort and resource now in the belief that it can be better in the future. Bigger, better and different. We've got to get that culture right back into Scotland. We can do this for real. Again, the investment paper will explain this fairly straightforwardly. £5 billion bond issue would enable us to capitalise a national investment bank, and assuming that it's giving out fairly safe loans, we're assuming a liquidity of about 20 to 1. That's a £100 million investment programme for industry and the public sector in Scotland, immediately available over a 20-year period. We can get investment into specific public services if we forget the crazy UK attitude to borrowing, which is borrowing to close deficit. We should not borrow to close deficit. We need to raise a small package of taxes to close deficit. And we've got to be honest about that. And then once we close deficit, we've got to use these other models. The National Investment Bank is crucial for getting investment into the private sector. We need to use a programme of investment in major public service and public infrastructure, and we should be doing that in intelligent ways, such as creating national companies which borrow against a business model. So we can build, if we take the national grid back into collective ownership, we can build our energy infrastructure in Scotland, and if the capacity isn't there to do it, we can establish the capacity by creating what we've been calling national mutual companies. So this is the idea that you create a company which every Scottish citizen has one non-tradable share. They have a vote in the decisions that this company makes. It runs on a national basis, and those companies can then offer dividends every year. I suggest in November, just in time for Santa Claus coming, and every Scot gets a share in that company. We can use these models to invest in industry sectors that don't exist. We can do it directly in the public sector, where, for example, in housing, we can borrow heavily in an internal housing market to create German-style housing factories that build absolutely top-notch public rental housing in this country. We can do it in an internal borrowing model that doesn't affect the public sector borrowing at all, and we can borrow against a mortgage-style future rents, and we can create that kind of high-quality housing. The aim being to get to a situation in Scotland that you have in Germany, where young professionals say, why would I want to buy a house? That's just a millstone round my neck. I've got a much better option, which is a gorgeous, secure, long-term lease on a high-quality house. We can start doing that just now, proper investment and proper housing to manage the economy and manage the... don't start in housing. I'm not going to go off in that direction. Right, so then what we've got to do, the next bit, industrial democracy. Can't say this enough. The UK's model in industrial democracy has collapsed, and it's a real problem. We are 27th out of 28 European countries, according to the European Industrial Democracy Index. Only Lithuania is worse. This is important for all sorts of reasons. First of all, it's why we have such high levels of inequality. If the workforce are unable to negotiate a share of wealth fairly in a growing economy, then we will get what we've just got, which is continuous wage contraction. But there's more than that. We have to recognise that the successful companies involve their workers in governance. Volkswagen, a third of the board are elected from their workforce. And if you talk to a shareholder in Volkswagen and you say, how do you feel about a third of your board being elected from the shop floor? They say, well, yeah, the managers don't know how the company works. We need that knowledge in our governance if we're going to be successful, and they are. If you look at a map of innovation of the UK, blue's low, red's high. It's a blue country with a couple of red dots, London, Edinburgh, Dundee, Manchester. If you look at Norway, it's just a red country with a blue gap where there are mountains. Goats apparently are not that innovative. The reason why this innovation happens like this in Norway is the vast majority of innovation is employee innovation, and it works like this. Two guys stand around conveyor belt. One of them says, do you realise if we turned this in the other direction, we could get 4 people around it and we'd double our productivity? They take that to their employee director. The employee director puts it to the board, and the board says, that's a good idea. Let's get that done, and they improve their productivity. In the UK, 2 guys on minimum wage, 0-hour contract, standing around a conveyor belt say, you know, if we turned this around the other way, we'd get 4 people around it. But I'm a low-pay, disillusioned, 0-hour contracts, minimum wage guy. I'll probably not be here in 2 months. Seriously, to hell with them. I don't care about the company. I don't care if it gets better. And that's the UK. That's why we've got to get industrial democracy right, because everybody that's involved in an enterprise should be working towards its success, not a whole bunch of people being treated badly and not involved in the governance of it. Industrial democracy is so important for everybody. We need to change the UK model. And then we need an industrial policy. And given that industrial policy is most of what I should have been talking about, I've kind of left it a bit late. Let me give you a bit of an idea about what we are talking about in industrial policy. First of all, the economy is a system of social provisioning. It is a means of distributing resource and goods around the economy, around the population. If it isn't doing it successfully, if people do not have the goods and the resources that they require, the economy is failing. That is a simple explanation of economic failure. If the economy is failing, we have 2 options. We can say nothing we can do about it, it's beyond democracy, which is the standard neoliberal line. Or we can say, no, democracy is a subset of society, society is democratic, we have a democratic right to influence the shape of that economy. And if we want to do it, there are things that we can do. So, one of the things I am kind of weary of hearing about is globalization. 70% of the economy is not globalised. 70% of the economy is domestic trade. Some of the supply chains, of course, are international in this. But in our obsession with globalisation, we gave up on localism. Local economies are much more important for distributing resource than global economies. They're the economies which actually create jobs in most communities. I live in a small rural community. Every time Quick Fit closes down a garage, that garage loses 5 people, the local shop loses, and so on, and so on, and so on. Local economies are absolutely crucial, and local trade is absolutely crucial. Is that my 5 minutes? This is not a matter of finding a way for multinational companies to get into local economies more. It's the opposite. It's about saying self-sufficient local economies are the key to wealth in most countries that actually achieve wealth. Food production and distribution is crucial examples of it. We need to start using all the tools to get these things working. I should talk more about localism, I haven't got time. Then we've got to start looking at the toolkit of things that we need to use, the kinds of tools that we've got to start using in this country. Procurement. We have to start using procurement to say if there's not jobs there, we must create them in sensible ways. We can either continue to allow our renewable resources to be exploited on the basis of allowing multinational corporations to build wind farms on the privately owned land of wealthy landowners, buying the kit in from China, exporting all the profits straight back to Norway, where quite a lot of them come from, and giving us the 20% of their profits on the way out, and we consider that to be a success. China does well, Norway does well, Scotland doesn't do well. We can just reverse this. We can just manufacture these things here. We can use procurement opt-outs with no difficulty to say, no, we're going to build the renewable technology in Scotland. We have to do is procurement. We have to use competitions policy. One of the major problems we've got in Scotland just now is that every time we do get a half-decent industry, it's bought out. Equity bought out. So the disposable contact lenses invented in Scotland, using Scottish money, employing 1,000 people, making them at Livingston at its peak. Now, many, many more than 1,000 people make those same disposable contact lenses, but they make them in Vermont because it was equity bought out and moved away. Wolfson Microelectronics, just another recent one gone. Nobody gives a monkeys who owns our economy. The ownership of our economy is crucial. We have to get ownership back into the country. We have to have many more Mittelstand-style companies which are here, held here, kept here, and grown here. Competitions policy. We need to use tax policy. Corporation tax cut. You don't need a global corporation tax policy. It's very easy. You just tax people on a basis of global turnover. You can't avoid it. It can't be escaped. You can tax any corporation on this basis, and it just disappears. And this is important because Scottish companies are competing against multinational corporations who are not paying tax. We have to equalise these sorts of models if we're going to have any chance of a domestic economy growing. We have to do these things. I feel I've probably talked too much. I'm going to give a couple of quick other examples because, actually, no, I won't. I'll just stop. Go and read the paper. That's only about 3 of a toolkit of about 30 or 40 specific toolkit items that we suggest that we use actively to come in and change. The last thing I want to say, because this I do want to say to economic development professionals, is this is not a challenge to your role. It's an enhancement to your role. But we've got to stop doing top-down. Top-down is stupid. One of the biggest problems with UK economic development is magic button theory. There is a single magic button that you can press, and if you press the magic button, everything will be okay. Deregulate, everything will be okay. cut taxes, everything. This is not true. There is no magic button. There is nothing that you can do as a single act which will fix anything. All that matters is everything you do. We have to go sector by sector. We have to create sector forums. And in each sector of the economy, we need to bring the big enterprises, the small enterprises, the employees, the customers, the local community, the training providers, everybody together and say, right, your economy, your industry sector, what needs to happen? How do you fix it? Build the plan and take it to government. We don't need intermediaries. The intermediaries are there to support you build the plan. You build the policies, you take it to government, and it's for government to say you can have this or you can't have this in a national and open debate. If we create sector forum model from top-down development, finally, we get to that last point, which is not fake participation in fake localism and fake activism. It's real. I don't want to hear industry sectors in Scotland moaning anymore because X or Y hasn't happened. Dependency Scotland has become a complete drain on our energies. I am tired of hearing people saying in meetings, but who's going to give us this? And how can we have it? And enough, Scotland. If we want to do this, it's down to us. Nobody is going to give us the economy we want. Nobody is going to give us the industry support that we want unless we start taking it. We have to create an assumption in the industry sector in this country that if they want a different environment to operate in, they have to shape it through engagement with all their stakeholders and take that to government. Industry forums are a way to look forward at the diversity of our economy and make sure no part of our economy is left behind, that we don't just go for fancy low-hanging fruit or the sexy things which everyone talks about. It's not all about biotech. A hell of a lot of it's about selling cornflakes in a local shop in a local high street. That is quite a downbeat note to end on, but we really genuinely can turn this round. There is a chance for Scotland to be different. The single most astute comment that was made in this entire election campaign so far was a vox pop on one of the TV programmes when they asked a working class guy in Glasgow if Scotland was a car, what kind of car would it be? And in an instant, the guy replied, a half-finished Lamborghini. Now, if I could pay political strategists to come up with sharp insights like that, I would be over the moon. You can't buy that stuff. He's absolutely right. The potential for the Scottish economy to be an absolutely first-rate powerhouse is undoubtedly there. We're just not finished. I should have said something about independence, haven't had a chance. Suffice to say, we need the powers. Thanks for that.